A 6-year-old girl collapsed in the snow outside a billionaire's mansion. Her lips were turning blue. Her tiny fingers couldn't even press the buzzer for help. And the 7 words she whispered when he found her? They shattered his entire world. My mama didn't come home. What he discovered when he went looking for her mother exposed a truth that had been right in front of him his whole life. A truth he'd been too blind to see. This is a story about a child's desperate journey through a blizzard. A mother who gave everything she had, and a man who had everything, except what mattered most. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll understand why one frozen morning became the warmest moment of their lives. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Section 1. The morning everything changed. 1,000 words. Let me tell you about a morning that nobody saw coming. A morning that would change 3 lives in ways none of them could have imagined. It was the middle of winter in Boston, and the city had been hit by the worst snowstorm in 20 years. The kind of storm that shuts everything down. Schools closed. Offices empty. The streets looked like they belonged in a different world, covered in white, quiet and still. But not everyone gets to stay inside when the weather turns bad. Not everyone has that choice. Her name was Sophie. She was 6 years old, with dark curls that stuck out from under her pink hat and brown eyes that were too wise for someone so young. That morning, she was walking alone through streets that were knee-deep in snow. Her little red coat was thin, too thin for weather like this. Her boots had been passed down from another child, and they had holes in them. Snow seeped in with every step. Her fingers were so cold they'd turned white, and her breath came out in little puffs that disappeared into the frozen air. Sophie had been walking since the sun came up. She was looking for someone. Someone who should have been home hours ago. Her mother. You see, Sophie's mother was named Isabel. Isabel worked as a housekeeper at one of the big hotels downtown. She worked the overnight shift, cleaning rooms while guests slept, changing sheets, scrubbing bathrooms, making everything perfect for people she would never meet. No matter how tired Isabel was, she always made it home before Sophie woke up. Always. She would slip into their tiny apartment, kiss Sophie's forehead, and whisper, "Mama's here, my love." But not this morning. Sophie woke up alone. The apartment was cold and silent. No sound of her mother humming in the kitchen. No smell of toast. Just emptiness and a fear that felt too big for her small heart. She remembered something her mother had told her once, during a thunderstorm when Sophie couldn't sleep. "If you're ever in trouble, baby, if you ever need help and I'm not there, go to the big house on Beacon Hill. The man who lives there, people say he's kind. People say he helps." Sophie had never been to that house. She didn't know the man's name, but she knew where it was. Everyone in Boston knew that house. So she put on her coat, grabbed her small backpack with her teddy bear inside, and started walking. The climb up Beacon Hill felt impossible. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached from the cold air. The wind pushed against her like it was trying to send her back home. But Sophie kept going, one small step at a time. When she finally reached the tall iron gates, she stopped and looked up. They were so big, so shiny and perfect. Beyond them, she could see a beautiful brick mansion with white columns and windows that glowed with warm light. Sophie wanted to press the button on the gate to call for help, but her fingers were too frozen to move properly. She tried once, twice, but her hand wouldn't work right. The world started to spin. Her legs felt like they couldn't hold her up anymore. And then Sophie fell. She crumpled into the snow, her backpack sliding off her shoulder. Everything started to go dark and blurry. Then she heard a voice, deep and worried. "Wait, there's someone at the gate." The gates buzzed and swung open. A man came running toward her, his long coat flying behind him. He dropped to his knees in the snow and caught her before she could fall all the way down. "I've got you," he said, wrapping his warm coat around her tiny, shaking body. "You're safe now. I've got you." His name was Thomas Grant. He was 43 years old and one of the most successful real estate developers in New England. He built apartment buildings, office towers, shopping centers. He turned old neighborhoods into new ones. People called him brilliant, powerful, untouchable. But right now, holding this freezing little girl in his arms, he wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about how light she felt, how her lips had turned blue, how wrong it was that a child was alone in a snowstorm. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked as he carried her toward the house. Sophie's lips trembled. Her voice came out so small he almost missed it. "Sophie. My mama didn't come home." Thomas felt something crack open in his chest. He shouted to the people who worked in his house as he pushed through the door. "Get blankets. Turn up the heat. Call a doctor now." Inside, a fire was roaring in the fireplace. Thomas laid Sophie gently on the soft leather couch and wrapped her in thick, warm blankets. She clutched her teddy bear with fingers that were starting to pink up again. Someone brought hot chocolate. Thomas knelt beside Sophie and held the cup steady while she took tiny sips. "Can you tell me your mama's name?" he asked softly. "Isabel," Sophie whispered. "Isabel Torres." "And where does she work?" "At the big hotel. The one with the gold doors. She cleans the rooms at night. She always comes home." Sophie's voice cracked, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Always. But she didn't. Did I do something bad?" Thomas shook his head quickly. "No. No, you did everything right. You were so brave." He pulled out his phone and started making calls. Within minutes, he had his assistant on the line. "I need you to find someone. Isabel Torres. She works housekeeping at one of the luxury hotels downtown. Find out which one and where she is. Right now." There was a pause. Then his assistant came back, uncertain. "Sir, there are 5 major hotels. It might take some time to—" "I don't care how long it takes," Thomas said, his voice like steel. "Find her." He looked down at Sophie, who was finally warming up, her eyes getting heavy with exhaustion. "We're going to find your mama," he said. "I promise you that." And in that moment, something changed. This wasn't just about helping anymore. This was the beginning of something that would turn all their lives upside down. The drive through Boston felt like moving through a dream where everything had frozen in place. Thomas sat in the back of his black Range Rover, and beside him, wrapped in a blanket that swallowed her whole, was Sophie. She stared out the window at the white world passing by, holding her teddy bear close. "We're going to find her," Thomas said. He wasn't sure if he was saying it to Sophie or to himself. She looked up at him with those big, serious eyes. Promise. He wanted to promise. God, how he wanted to. But he'd learned a long time ago not to make promises he might not be able to keep. "I'm going to do everything I can," he said instead. Everything. That seemed good enough for her. She nodded and leaned her head against the seat. Thomas's mind was racing. Isabel Torres. A woman he'd never met. A woman who cleaned hotel rooms, who scrubbed toilets, who made beds for strangers. A woman who worked through the night so her daughter could have a life. And he'd never even thought about people like her. Not really. They were invisible. Background noise in a busy world. His phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through. "Sir, I found her. The Hampton Grand Hotel on Boylston Street. She's listed on the overnight housekeeping staff. Call the hotel. Tell them we're coming. Tell them to find her." "Yes, sir." When they arrived at the hotel, Thomas felt anger building in his chest. The building was enormous, all marble and gold, designed to look luxurious and expensive. He'd actually invested in this property 5 years ago. He was part owner. And he had no idea what happened behind the scenes. The manager met them in the lobby, a nervous man in a suit that was too tight. "Mr. Grant, this is unexpected. I wasn't informed. Where is Isabel Torres?" Thomas interrupted. I'm not sure. She clocked in for her shift last night, but you don't know where she is right now," Thomas finished, his voice cold. "In your hotel. One of your employees. And you don't know." The manager shifted uncomfortably. "We have a large staff, sir. It's difficult to keep track." "Show me where she was working." They walked through the hotel, past the fancy lobby where guests sat drinking coffee, past the restaurant, past the ballroom. Then down a hallway that guests never saw. Through a door marked staff only. And there, in a small room filled with cleaning supplies and industrial washing machines, they found her. Isabel was lying on the floor, curled on her side. Her uniform was soaked with sweat. Her face was pale, almost gray. She wasn't moving. "Mama," Sophie screamed and tried to run forward, but Thomas caught her. "Wait, sweetheart. Let me check first." He handed Sophie to his assistant and rushed to Isabel's side. He pressed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. "There. Faint, but there." "She's alive," he said, relief washing over him. "Call an ambulance." But even as he said it, he knew it would take too long. The roads were a mess. Traffic was backed up everywhere. "No," he said, scooping Isabel into his arms. She was light. Too light. "We're taking her ourselves. Move." They rushed back to the car. Thomas laid Isabel across the back seat, her head in his lap. Sophie sat beside them, holding her mother's hand and crying. "Mama, please wake up. Please." Thomas's driver took off through the snowy streets as fast as he dared. Every red light felt like torture. Every turn felt too slow. Thomas looked down at Isabel. She was young, maybe early 30s. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Her hands were rough and red from cleaning chemicals. This was somebody's mother. Somebody's whole world. And she'd collapsed from exhaustion in a hotel he partially owned, and nobody had even noticed. "How long has she been working?" Thomas asked his assistant, who was on the phone with HR. "Records show she's been with the hotel for 4 years. But in the last 6 months, she's been picking up extra shifts. Sometimes working 16, 18 hours straight." Thomas closed his eyes. "Why?" "Her file shows she's a single mother. Sole income. And..." The assistant paused. 6 months ago, her hours were cut from full-time to part-time. No benefits. She's been trying to make up the lost income. Something cold settled in Thomas's stomach. "We did that. The management company I'm part of. We cut hours to save money." "Yes, sir." They saved money. And this woman nearly died because of it. When they reached Massachusetts General Hospital, everything became a blur of sound and movement. Doctors rushed out. Isabel was lifted onto a stretcher. Machines beeped. Voices shouted medical terms Thomas didn't understand. He stood in the hallway, holding Sophie's hand, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. A doctor came out about an hour later. She looked tired but calm. "She's stable," the doctor said. But it was close. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, complete exhaustion. Her body just shut down. Another few hours, and we'd be looking at kidney failure, possibly worse. Thomas felt sick. Will she be okay? With rest and proper nutrition, yes. But she can't keep living like this. Her body can't take it. Sophie tugged on Thomas's sleeve. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's sleeping, but yes. Come with me." They walked into a quiet room where Isabel lay in a hospital bed, connected to IVs and monitors. She looked peaceful now, but so fragile. Sophie climbed onto the chair beside the bed and took her mother's hand. "I found you, Mama," she whispered. "I found you." Thomas stood at the foot of the bed, watching them. Mother and daughter, together again. And he made a decision. This would never happen again. Not in any building he owned. Not to anyone. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Because some things mattered more than profit. Some things mattered more than saving money. People mattered. Mothers mattered. Little girls who walked through snowstorms mattered. And it was time he started acting like it. Isabel woke to the sound of beeping. Steady, rhythmic beeping. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, she didn't know where she was. White walls. Bright lights. The smell of hospitals. Then she saw Sophie. Her daughter was curled up in a chair beside the bed, fast asleep, still holding that old teddy bear. And in another chair sat a man she'd never seen before. Tall, with salt and pepper hair, wearing an expensive sweater. He looked tired. Panic shot through Isabel. She tried to sit up. "Sophie. She's safe," the man said quickly, standing up. "She's right here. You're both safe." Isabel's head was spinning. Where am I? Mass General. You collapsed at work. You've been unconscious for about 8 hours.
Work.
The word hit her like a punch to the gut. Oh no.
No, no, no.
I have to go back. They'll fire me. I can't lose this job. She tried to swing her legs out of bed, but the room tilted dangerously. The man moved forward, gently pressing her shoulder. You're not going anywhere. And nobody's firing you.
Please.
Just rest. Isabel looked at him. Really looked. Who are you? My name is Thomas Grant. I'm one of the owners of the hotel where you work. Isabel's heart sank. An owner. She was talking to one of the owners. I'm so sorry, sir, she said, tears already forming. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I've just been trying to work more hours because they cut my time and the rent was due and Sophie needed new shoes and I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just push through one more night. Her voice broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Thomas pulled his chair closer. How long have you been working like this? 6 months. Sometimes 80, 90 hours a week. With no breaks. Isabel laughed, but it came out bitter. Breaks are for people with benefits, sir. I'm part-time now. No insurance. No sick days. I get paid by the hour. If I stop working, we don't eat. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked her. I'm sorry. Isabel blinked. What? I'm sorry. I own part of that hotel. I approved the decision to cut hours for housekeeping staff to reduce costs. I didn't think about what that meant for real people. For people like you. That's on me. It's not your fault. Yes, it is, Thomas said, his voice stronger now. I built a career on making buildings more profitable. I forgot that buildings are nothing without the people who work in them. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snowy city. Your daughter walked 3 miles through a blizzard this morning looking for you, he said quietly. Did you know that? Isabel's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Sophie. She's okay. She made it to my house. That's how I found you. Isabel looked at her sleeping daughter. Her brave, beautiful baby girl had walked through a snowstorm alone because her mother hadn't come home. I don't know what to say, Isabel whispered. Thomas turned back to her. You don't have to say anything, but I want you to listen.
Things are going to change.
I'm already making calls. Better pay for all hourly workers. Health benefits. Limits on consecutive hours. Nobody should have to choose between their health and feeding their child. Isabel stared at him, afraid to hope. Why would you do that? Because it's right, he said simply. And because... He paused, looking at Sophie, because that little girl reminded me what actually matters in life. Over the next few days, Isabel couldn't believe what was happening. The hospital bills?
Covered.
Her rent for the next 3 months?
Paid.
And then came the offer that changed everything. Thomas's assistant visited her hospital room with a folder. Inside was a job offer. Not housekeeping. Office manager for one of Thomas's real estate companies. Regular hours. 3 times her old pay. Full benefits. This has to be a mistake, Isabel said, staring at the papers. No mistake, the assistant smiled. Mr. Grant was very clear. When Isabel was discharged from the hospital, Thomas came to pick them up himself. He drove them home to their small apartment in Dorchester. It wasn't much. 2 rooms. Peeling paint. A heater that only worked half the time. But it was theirs. This is where we live, Sophie said proudly, taking Thomas's hand and pulling him inside. Want to see my drawings? Thomas smiled. I'd love to. While Sophie showed him her artwork taped to the refrigerator, Isabel made tea with shaking hands. This powerful, wealthy man was sitting on her worn-out couch, genuinely admiring her daughter's crayon pictures. This one's beautiful, Thomas said, pointing to a drawing of a rainbow. You're very talented. Sophie beamed. Mama says I can be anything I want when I grow up. Your mama's absolutely right. Isabel brought the tea over and sat down. For a moment, they just sat there. The 3 of them in that small apartment with its cracked ceiling and drafty windows. Why are you really doing all this? Isabel asked softly. People like you don't usually see people like me. Thomas set down his cup. You want the honest truth? I was lonely. I had everything. Success, money, a big house. But I didn't have connection. I didn't have purpose beyond the next deal, the next project. And then Sophie knocked on my gate, and suddenly everything felt real again. He looked at Isabel, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. You two reminded me what life is supposed to be about. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and gentle this time. But inside that small apartment, something warm was beginning to grow. Something neither of them had expected. Something that felt a lot like hope. The weeks that followed were like living in a dream Isabel was afraid to wake up from. She started her new job at Thomas's real estate office downtown. At first, she was terrified. She'd barely finished high school. What did she know about managing an office? But it turned out that years of juggling multiple jobs, managing impossible schedules, and keeping everything organized had taught her more than any college degree could. You're a natural at this, her supervisor told her after the first week. Have you ever thought about getting management training? Management training. Isabel had laughed. That was for other people. People who had time for school. People who had money for tuition. But her supervisor was serious. Think about it. The company has a program. They'll pay for it. The most surprising thing, though, wasn't the job. It was Thomas. He didn't disappear after his good deed was done. He showed up. A lot. At first, it seemed professional. He'd stop by Isabel's desk to check how she was settling in. How's it going? He'd ask. Do you have everything you need? Then he started showing up with coffee. I noticed you like vanilla lattes, he'd say casually, setting one on her desk. But it meant he'd been paying attention. When Sophie's school had a holiday concert, Thomas asked if he could come. You don't have to, Isabel said quickly. I'm sure you're busy. I'd really like to, he said. If that's okay with you.
So he came.
He sat in a tiny auditorium chair, watched 6-year-olds sing off-key, and clapped louder than anyone when Sophie took her bow. Afterward, they went for ice cream. The three of them squished into a booth at a small shop in Cambridge. Did you see me, Thomas? Sophie asked, chocolate ice cream on her nose. Did you see me sing? I saw you, Thomas said, smiling. You were the best one up there. That's not true, Sophie giggled. But thank you. Watching them together, Isabel felt something shift in her chest. Something warm and terrifying at the same time. One of the other mothers from school had seen them together and later asked Isabel, Your husband is so good with her. Isabel had started to correct her, but the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, Thomas was good with Sophie. And Sophie adored him. She'd started calling him Mr. Thomas, then just Thomas. And then one day, Isabel overheard her telling another kid at school, That's my friend. He saved me from the snow. But it wasn't just about Sophie. Isabel found herself thinking about Thomas when he wasn't around. The way he listened when she talked, really listened like her words actually mattered. The way he asked her opinion on things at work and then actually used her suggestions. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching. One evening, after a particularly long day, Thomas offered to drive them home. It was raining, and Isabel had been dreading the bus ride. Are you sure? She asked. Isabel, I'm sure. In the car, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, hugging her teddy bear. Thomas drove carefully through the wet streets, windshield wipers keeping a steady rhythm. Can I ask you something? Isabel said quietly. Anything. Why don't you have a family? I mean, you're successful, kind. I'm surprised you're not married. Thomas was quiet for a moment. I was engaged once. About 10 years ago. She said I was married to my work. And she was right. I chose the company over her. Over everything. After that, I just threw myself into work even more. It was easier than dealing with what I'd lost. Do you regret it? Every day. He glanced at her. Until recently. The car felt suddenly smaller. Warmer. Isabel, Thomas said as they pulled up to her building. I need to tell you something. This, you and Sophie, this isn't charity for me. It stopped being that the moment I met you both. You've changed my life. And I know there's a power imbalance here, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I just need you to know. I know, Isabel said softly, reaching over to touch his hand. I feel it too. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Isabel felt something she thought she'd forgotten how to feel. Not just hope for survival, but hope for happiness. The turning point came on a Saturday in early March. Thomas had invited them to his house for dinner. Isabel had been there before, but always briefly. This felt different. More personal. He actually cooked. Pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, salad. Nothing fancy, but made with care. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace. Sophie had discovered Thomas's collection of old books and was flipping through one with pictures of animals. Isabel and Thomas sat on the floor, backs against the couch, watching her. She's happy, Isabel said quietly. I haven't seen her this relaxed in, I can't even remember. You're happy too, Thomas observed. I can tell. Isabel looked at him. I am. For the first time in forever, I'm not just trying to survive. I'm actually living. And that's because of you. No. Thomas shook his head. It's because of you. Your strength, your courage. You did that. I just opened a door. You opened more than a door, Thomas. He turned to face her fully. Isabel, I need to be honest with you. I'm falling in love with you. With both of you. And I know that might sound crazy because we haven't known each other that long, but I've never been more sure of anything. Isabel's breath caught. You don't have to say anything right now, he said quickly. No pressure. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. Isabel looked at him. This man who had saved her daughter, who had changed her life, who had shown her what real kindness looked like. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And then, with Sophie reading peacefully nearby and the fire crackling beside them, Thomas leaned in and kissed her. Gentle, tender, full of promise. When they pulled apart, Sophie had stopped reading and was staring at them with wide eyes. Does this mean Thomas can be my daddy? She asked. Both adults laughed, and Isabel pulled her daughter into a hug. Maybe someday, baby. Maybe someday soon. Thomas wrapped his arms around both of them, and for the first time in 43 years, his big empty house felt like a home. 6 months later, spring had turned to summer, and everything was different. Isabel had been promoted to director of operations. She was thriving in ways she never imagined. She'd even started taking night classes, working toward a business degree. Sophie was enrolled in a wonderful school with art programs and music lessons. She was making friends, laughing more, growing into herself. And Thomas, he was transformed. People at work noticed. He smiled more. He knew employees' names now, not just the executives. He changed policies across all his properties. Better wages, healthcare, protection for workers. Other developers in Boston started following his lead. But the biggest change wasn't visible to most people. It was in the way he'd come alive again. How he'd stopped measuring his life by his bank account and started measuring it by his relationships. He and Isabel saw each other every day now. Sometimes simple things, coffee before work, lunch in the park. Other times bigger moments, weekend trips to Cape Cod, teaching Sophie to ride a bike, family game nights. Yes, family. That's what they'd become. One evening in late June, Thomas asked Isabel to meet him somewhere special. He picked her up at sunset. Sophie stayed home with Thomas's housekeeper, who had become like a grandmother to her. Where are we going? Isabel asked as they drove. You'll see. He took her to the Boston Public Garden. They walked along the pond, past the swan boats and weeping willows, until they reached a quiet bench with a view of the city's skyline turning gold in the sunset. This is where I used to come when I felt lost, Thomas said quietly. I'd sit here and look at all those buildings I'd helped create, all that success, and feel nothing. Empty. He turned to face her. Isabel, 6 months ago, a little girl knocked on my gate in the middle of a snowstorm. I thought I was saving her. But the truth is, you too saved me. You gave me purpose. You gave me joy. You gave me a reason to rush home every night instead of staying late at the office. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. Let me finish, Thomas said, smiling.
Please.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Isabel's hand flew to her mouth. Thomas dropped to one knee right there on the path. I know this might seem fast to some people, he continued, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever met. And Sophie is the light of my life. I want to be there for both of you. Not as a friend or a helper, but as family. Real family. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, beautiful ring with a single diamond that caught the light. Isabel Torres, will you marry me? Will you? And Sophie, let me love you both for the rest of my life. Tears streamed down Isabel's face. She couldn't speak. She just nodded, again and again, laughing through her tears. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, Thomas. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I love you, Isabel whispered against his chest. I love you too, he said. Both of you. So much. When they returned home, Sophie was waiting at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. Did you ask her? She demanded the moment they walked in. Did she say yes? Isabel laughed. You knew. Thomas told me last week. Sophie ran over and hugged them both. He asked if it was okay with me, and I said yes because I want Thomas to be my daddy for real. Isabel knelt down to her daughter's level. Are you absolutely sure, baby? This is a big change. Sophie nodded seriously. He saved us, Mama. And now we get to keep him forever. Thomas crouched beside them, and the three of them held each other, a small circle of love right there in the hallway. The wedding was small and perfect, just close friends and the people who mattered most. They held it in August in the public garden, surrounded by flowers and sunshine. Sophie was the flower girl, walking down the aisle in a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine itself. When Thomas and Isabel exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye watching. You walked into my life in a storm, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. And you became my shelter, my peace, my everything. You saw me when I was invisible, Isabel replied, tears streaming down her face. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave my daughter a father. You gave us a future. After they were pronounced husband and wife, Sophie ran up and hugged them both. We're a real family now, she shouted. And they were. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and the guests had gone home, the three of them sat together in the living room of what was now their home. Sophie was falling asleep between them on the couch, holding her teddy bear. Do you remember that morning? Isabel asked Thomas softly. When Sophie knocked on your gate? Every single detail, he said. I remember thinking my life was perfect before that day. Complete. But I was so wrong. What is it now? Isabel asked. Thomas looked at his wife and his daughter. At this family, he never knew he was missing. Now it's full, he said. Finally, wonderfully full. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall.
Not a storm this time.
Just a soft, steady rain that nourished the earth and made things grow. And inside, three people who had found each other in the snow sat together in the warmth. No longer alone. No longer afraid. They were home. The end. Sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the hardest moments. Sometimes one act of kindness changes everything. And sometimes, when we open our hearts to help others, we discover that we're the ones who needed saving all along. Thank you for being here with us through this journey. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.